Okay, Ken, can we talk about the elephant in the room here? Give us something. I know there's so much to tap into with Ohtani. I don't even know where to start, man. Like, is it how many teams could possibly be in on Ohtani, like realistically?
Oh, I think any number of teams, Danny. And we can talk about the two New York teams. We can talk about the two Los Angeles teams. San Francisco would be another team. Seattle has indicated that they're out through Daniel Kramer of MLB.com's reporting. There are other teams as well, the Cubs, the Blue Jays, and I'm probably missing a few. The Rangers, let's not forget them, the defending World Series champions. The real question to me, and what I wrote about earlier this week, is how teams are going to value him, knowing he cannot pitch in 2024, and wondering not only if he can pitch effectively in 2025, but how many innings he can provide, and beyond that, his desire to continue pitching. And I quoted some people, or actually one executive is saying, hey, I want to know. I want to look him in the eye and know he wants to keep pitching. I don't know that. Now, Ohtani obviously is marketing himself as a two-way guy through his agent Nez Bolello of CAA. I don't believe that he wants to stop doing it anytime soon, pitching and hitting. But in time, who knows? And also, coming off a second major elbow ligament repair, who knows what kind of pitcher he's going to be. So where I'm getting at with all this is that it's really difficult to value him, knowing or not knowing what exactly the pitching element is going to be going forward. You can value him as a hitter, certainly do that, and you can say, okay, we'll add X as a pitcher, but the X is the part that is just not known here.
Hey, Ken, you mentioned Seattle. I don't think we've talked about this. You and I, AJ and me certainly did the other day when we saw that report from Kramer about Seattle. How shocked are you that they're basically, I mean, someone has to leak it publicly saying that they're not going to be in the bidding for someone like Shohei Ohtani? To me, I was super surprised. I think they were a team that was brought up maybe as second place. Actually, in the recent athletic survey that was put up, they were in second place, at least from a fan perspective. And even from following other writers and insiders throughout the year, I think people thought that Seattle would have a legitimate chance at trying to lure him to come over there. Even if they didn't have the top bid, if they were close enough. How surprised are you that they're not going to be in play for a guy like him when, I don't know, I felt like we've been waiting for them to do something like this for 5 years?
Surprised on one hand, Scott. If you recall during the All-Star game, the fans in Seattle chanting for Ohtani, I believe it was "We Want Ohtani." There is certainly an appetite among their fan base, as well as every other, to have this player in their favorite team's uniform. Where I'm not surprised is that Seattle has spent at times, they spent for Robbie Ray, they spent for Luis Castillo, but they haven't really spent in a huge way. They've done some piecemeal things. Obviously, the Ray signing was a big one, and look what happened. He had to undergo Tommy John surgery. But these are deals in the $120 million range. They're not in the $200, $300, $400 million range. They have not done that. And if you remember at the end of the season, their catcher, Kyle Raleigh, basically called them out for not going at it the way the Texas Rangers have. I didn't expect things to change necessarily, but with Ohtani, you at least have to investigate it if you're the Mariners, because who knows? Maybe he wants to come there. It's a Pacific Coast city, closer to Japan, obviously, than an East Coast or Midwest city. It's a city with a large Japanese population, a city that really is quite vibrant and international in its own way. So if I were them, I'd be looking at it. And Mike Petriello today on MLB.com, he listed his top teams for Ohtani, and he had them second as well. And he had them second because they're one of the few teams that has starting pitching but needs the offense. Most teams obviously need the offense and want Ohtani, but a lot of the teams that are supposed contenders or would-be contenders for him just lack enough pitching. And obviously, if they need to spend on pitching, maybe they can't spend as much on Ohtani. Seattle is not in that position. They're in position where he could really help them short-term and long-term, but again, according to that report, it's not happening.
And Cal Riley's supposed to join us next week, so we'll have some fun asking him how it is to not be in that sweepstakes. And you're right, Ken. I mean, they were 18th in payroll on opening day this season at 137 mil. I feel like the team is thriving. I mean, the ballpark's often pretty filled up, and they're not spending as much as they did years back when it was like the Cano Cruise days. So surprising to me, Danny, you know?
Yeah. So, Ken, I got an interesting question. You mentioned 2025, obviously, when Otani's able to come back and pitch and not knowing how much he's going to be able to pitch. Has there been any teams that you've talked to that even had a thought of maybe having him as a bullpen guy instead of a starter when he does come back? Is that even possible?
I have not heard that, Danny. And a lot of fans ask about that from time to time, too. But if you think about it, it's difficult for him to be in the lineup and be available as a reliever in that particular game. How does that even work? He's got to warm up at some point, and he might be hitting that inning. So I guess it's conceivable you could do it. He certainly did it in the WBC on a one-time basis in the championship game. But I don't know that he could do that over 162 games. And I don't know how that would be for his arm either, how that would all respond based on his medical history. So that to me seems a long shot. What isn't a long shot if he no longer pitches for whatever reason? Maybe physically he's not capable, maybe he doesn't want to, whatever the reason might be. The outfield. The outfield, according to the executives I spoke with, is realistic. They all think he's well athletic enough to do that and be a really good outfielder. But of course, if you're talking about a $500 million, $600 million player, you want a little bit more than a right fielder, right? You want the pitcher too. So these all are questions that come factored into this mix. And again, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, because for all the questions I'm raising here, it only takes one team. And I believe there are going to be multiple teams willing to give Shohei Ohtani the deal he wants with the opt-outs, whatever ultimately the final agreement comes to. There'll be teams willing to do it.
Okay, so Ken, we're getting some questions about Ohtani on specific teams. I'll kind of mix them all together here and add it to my thought process of when he's going to sign, because I know you mentioned on Fair Territory the other day, it could take a little longer than people think. I think there's many people that are just going back to recent history and saying, oh, well, he didn't take long last time. And when his arbitration talk came up, I mean, obviously he didn't get to arbitration. He took his money, at 30 mil or something like that. And it was really quick. I think it was like early November. You know, he just wanted to get that done, whatever that means, as if people really know what he's thinking. So wanted to get your thoughts on how long you think this is going to take. And so two fans are asking about the Blue Jays and the Dodgers, and I'm actually thinking the Dodgers plays into this a lot because we now have Yamamoto available for about a month, right, to sign with a ball club, and I'm wondering if which one goes first, because you could look at Yamamoto's money as Ohtani and say, okay, well, I'm going to destroy that number. And maybe if the number's even bigger, it makes my number even larger, even though we're not comparable people. The other end of that is if the Dodgers don't end up with Ohtani and Yamamoto gets even more money because they become more desperate. So do you feel like some of this is kind of webbed together?
I do believe that it might be webbed together. Now, I'll take each question one at a time. The how long question is really interesting because there's one school of thought that says he has to sign quickly because the teams that are interested in giving him $500 million are going to want answers quickly because they can't have that money tied up the entire offseason while other options disappear. That would drive a quicker signing, right? The other end of it is Yamamoto. So Yamamoto, the expectation is he's going to go for $200 million plus. He is a 25-year-old free agent from Japan who has won 3 straight Japanese Cy Young Awards. He's won MVPs. He is the belle of the ball in terms of free agents other than Ohtani. So if that happens and you're Ohtani, maybe you do want to wait because once he is off the board, let's say he goes to the Mets, well, maybe the Yankees get more interested in Ohtani. Not necessarily even the Yankees, the Dodgers, whoever you might want to say. He's not really a fit for the Yankees, Ohtani. But it will put other teams on tilt. So I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out. You have those kind of diametrical forces going against each other. Now, as for the Dodgers, they're a really interesting team. They don't need Ohtani for attendance. They don't need him to become a bigger brand. They're a huge brand. But even if you take all of that into account, you sign Shohei Ohtani, your brand does get bigger. And you can do some things from a global marketing standpoint that you couldn't do before. And I've written about this and talked about it on the air too. Ohtani is a guy that would give them a jolt at a time when they're coming off back-to-back playoff disappointments. They have a great team, but fans are kind of, we've seen this every year now. Not every year, but a number of years where they disappoint in the playoffs. They might want something more to excite them. That's one end of it from the Dodgers' perspective. Now, they need pitching, right, for 2024. Ohtani's not going to pitch in 2024. That's a factor. But to me, they can do Ohtani and starting pitching. The Blue Jays are really interesting here. There has been a lot of talk about the Blue Jays. I've had people tell me watch them as a sleeper. I can see it and I can't. The Blue Jays are a good team, but if you're Ohtani and you're hell-bent on winning, I don't know that they're a certainty. Now, they have a rotation in place and they could use him. Perfect fit for their lineup, left-handed hitter, of course, that would help them. But does he want to play in that competitive division? Or does he want to go to a place where he thinks he can win more easily and go about it that way? Toronto is an international city, growing Japanese population. There is nothing wrong with Toronto from a player's perspective. But I'm not sure I buy that they're going to be the team in the end.
Ken, hypothetically, let's say Dodgers sign Ohtani tomorrow. Do they try to work something out to bring Mike Trout with him?
I don't know. And Mike Trout's trade value right now is not as high as it once was, obviously, because of all the physical questions surrounding him and the money left on his contract. And the other part with Mike Trout is, does he want to go? Any talk about Mike Trout being traded has to start with Mike Trout. If he doesn't want to go, then he's not going. And that is something that in all these conversations you hear fans have, and sometimes writers too, it gets overlooked. The guy has a full no-trade clause. He has not shown any inclination to want to leave Anaheim at this stage of his career. Now, people can have their opinions on that, and that's fine, but ultimately it's his choice. He has the no-trade clause for a reason. So is it possible that he gets traded this winter? Of course, it's possible, but it seems to me the Angels, again, want to compete. They just hired Ron Washington. They're hiring some new coaches. They want to do some things, and trading Mike Trout would not help them competitively.
Nor business-wise, I mean, after that, if the Angels are struggling, what are you going to Angels games for? You go from
Right,
Trout and
Scott,
Ohtani to this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
one more point on that, too. When I say trading him would not help them competitively, someone might say, well, wait, what if they get a boatload back? I don't believe they're getting a boatload back from Mike Trout right now because he has not played that much in the last few years, and he's got a ton of money left. So he's on the wrong side of 30, at least from teams' perspectives. It doesn't seem to me he'd get the boatload that an average fan might expect.
The only thing surprising to me, Ken, is if I'm Mike, I know it's not his style, but man, I mean, you could make the case that he's past his prime, at least with the physical injuries that he's been going through. He's still going to be an exceptional ball player when he's on the field. You're running out of time to be in playoff baseball. I don't think anybody right now is looking at the Angels roster going, without Ohtani, oh, that's going to be a playoff team in the AL West.
Well, there is a chance still, guys, I don't know how big a chance it is, that the Angels re-sign Ohtani. And if they re-sign Ohtani, then you're Trout and you're looking at this entirely differently. Now, it seems to me to be a long shot. Ohtani has been pretty clear about one thing. He wants to win. Now, we know he's comfortable in Anaheim, and we know he can be private in Anaheim. It's obviously the Los Angeles market, but it's in Orange County. It's not the same as being with the Dodgers or the Mets, the Yankees, name a big market team. So that part of it might appeal to him, and Artie Moreno might want to keep him. But at the same time, he does have this desire to win. And we saw that during the WBC, how much that fired him up, pitching for Team Japan and playing for Team Japan and bringing that WBC title back home to Japan. So I don't see the Angels doing it, but at the same time, I can't rule it out either.
Last thing, Ken, just because I use this example all year, and it actually applies now more so than ever based on, the technical difficulties the other day that we covered with Ohtani not able to speak at his media availability for the MVP. I use the example when people ask me about baseball and marketing, and I go, imagine if LeBron never made the playoffs and never spoke. How would that affect the sport over the last
Well,
15
that's a
years?
great
Like that
point.
simply, you know?
Now, it's not like Ohtani never speaks. He does speak after he starts. So it's not exactly like he's mum. But we haven't heard from him in more than 3 months now. Now, that's his right. But you're right, Scott, in terms of the popularity of the sport, the marketing of the sport, the globalization of the sport, it's not the greatest scenario. And I don't know who is stage managing him. I don't know if that's coming from his own desires. And certainly when he has the amount of work he has to do to get through a day during the season, you can understand why he limits his media accessibility. I get that. But certainly, whether it's his desire or whether it's his agent's desire, I would suggest that it's not doing him any great favor or it's not doing the sport any great favor. Now, he might not care. My gosh, he was two-time unanimous MVP doing it his way. I think he probably thinks his way is working pretty well, and it is. But if I'm giving him $500 million, here's another end of it. What is his obligation to me at that point as the owner of the team that's doing that? I would expect I would want a little bit more out of him, if not a lot more, than he is given during his time with the Angels.
Yeah, it's a great call because you can't, I mean, at least that from what I've seen, you can't put like clauses in, hey, you have to speak at this time, make an appearance or whatever. So we'll see what happens.